Welcome to the Fail Forward podcast. The purpose of this podcast is change the negative stigma around failure into a positive. Failure is only a negative if we do not learn from it and we give up. Welcome back to the Fail Forward podcast. Today I've got the awesome Chris Hawkins from BBC Radio 6 and also How to DJ podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Amazing feels a bit strong, but thank you, Henry.
Honestly, me and my sister and my family, we are really avid BBC Radio 6 listeners. And I remember years ago when they were actually going to stop Radio 6 for a while, weren't they? And we petitioned along with everyone else. So it's really great to have you here, Chris. How are you today?
I'm really good, thanks. It's a pleasure to be on with you, Henry. Cheers for having me.
So tell me, Chris, how did you get into, tell me your journey through music and how that was through childhood, through becoming a Radio 6 DJ?
I was obsessed with radio from a very young age. I was fascinated by the way that DJs and presenters could talk directly to me, the one-on-one nature of the medium. Absolutely fascinated by that. And I was a huge music fan from a very, very young age. So I needed to find a way to combine those two passions and somehow make a living out of them. And at the age of 16, I did work experience at my local radio station, which was BBC Radio Shropshire. I grew up in a tiny village in very rural North Shropshire. And I remember my mum would take me in to do this work experience. She would drive me there and I did it for 2 weeks. And at the end of that 2 weeks, there were no security passes at the time. At the end of the 2 weeks, I just kept turning up until it got to a point where no one really knew who I was and why I was there, but that I made good tea. And I made a lot of tea for a very long time and ended up staying at Radio Shropshire on and off over the course of a year whilst I was at school. And I did some hospital radio and then went to university in Nottingham. And the reason that I wanted to be at University in Nottingham was not only because it was a brilliant university, but because they had a great BBC local radio station. Radio Nottingham had a very high hit rate. Matthew Bannister and Trevor Dan had gone on to run Radio 1, and I was a huge Simon Mayo fan, and Simon had been at Radio Nottingham. So I did all I could to get a job at Radio Nottingham whilst at university. In fact, I started at the radio station before I started at university. And I stayed at Radio Nottingham for the whole time I was at uni. In fact, I presented Drive Time by my third year and left exams early on a couple of occasions, my finals, to go and do the Drive Time show. So I left doing Drive Time, moved to London, followed my dream to London and got a job at BBC Radio London, as it was GLR at the time. There were amazing presenters there like Danny Baker, like Chris Morris, like Chris Evans. And I wanted to be there, got there. And when Six Music launched, I was part of the original lineup and have been there ever since.
Absolutely love that. I mean, that's you followed your passion and you followed your dreams, and that's commendable. So, what challenges did you have on that road to get into Radio 6? How difficult or challenging was it to get into that place?
I think it's even harder now for anyone wanting to get into radio, simply because there are fewer and fewer local radio stations to learn the trade. So I learnt mine at Shropshire, Nottingham, and at BBC London. And I would make a pretty good case that I'm still learning that radio is about experience. There's not an obvious route in. I think a lot of people that work in radio do it because they too, like I was, are obsessed with the medium, that they are really engaged by the way that radio works. And it takes a certain type of person to give up the time that it takes to get to a certain point. So whether it be producer or presenter, it's all about the 10,000 hours.
Yes.
What was the question even, Henry?
It was just what were the challenges, and you're right. It's the 10,000 hours is right, and it's so poignant for this podcast because we talk about it all the time. That it's not just about the natural ability to do something; it's actually putting the effort and the time in, and failing forward, learning from all the different mistakes. And you're exactly right. The 10,000 hours thing is a real thing. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I remember sending off demo tapes and writing to every radio station to try and get jobs. And actually, weirdly, after years of sending out demos to national radio stations, I actually got a call from a station boss that I hadn't even dared to approach, and that was Leslie Douglas, who ran Radio 2, and she said that she was setting up this new radio station. Would I like to be a part of it? That was Six Music many years ago. So actually, weirdly, after all those letters and all those demo tapes being sent off, I actually got a call out of the blue, and that's the job that I still do now.
Amazing. How did that feel in that moment?
Unreal. Because, like I said, when I started out as a kid, getting into music and radio, my absolute dream was to present a national radio show for the BBC, and that is what I've been doing for a really long time now.
Yeah, absolutely love that. Absolutely love that. So, and then moving on now into your podcast. Tell me more about that.
So obviously, the podcast world exploded, and I waited a long time before deciding what it was that I might do. Lots of different things were suggested, and lots of companies talked to me about what might be the right thing. And for me, How to DJ, which is my podcast, How to DJ was a way of me tapping into a world that I'm right in the middle of, that I love, and have many friends through a career lifetime of doing the job that I do. I've been very lucky to meet some of the best radio presenters and club DJs in the world. So it's them that make up the guests, and we're now getting up to, I think, near 100 episodes with people that I have so much respect for, and I am amazed, delighted, and humbled that so many great names have joined me on that podcast.
Amazing. Absolutely love that. So what's the basis of the podcast? Is it finding out how to DJ? Is it talking about the challenges that DJs have and how they get into where they are?
Yeah, all of that. Definitely. It's about the life stories of DJs. It's about the inspiring stories. It's about, in a lot of cases, the misadventure, that the stuff that's gone wrong along the way, that in most cases has resulted in something bigger and better being achieved. So it's about getting into the minds of DJs rather than necessarily about the technique of DJing, although that is a part of the conversation.
Yeah, definitely, and hearing the inspiring stories, and I've been I've followed music all my life, and I wanted to be a DJ, and I just never had the attention to detail. I tried so many times. My friends were into dance music, and there was always a set of Technics decks in a room, and I just couldn't get that. I just couldn't ever get it to stick. So I realised I was more of a listener than a doer. So tell me, how much practice did you have to put in to get to a DJ, and how much is, what my question is I suppose, moving on from that question, is that for me, looking at DJs, it looks like a really glamorous life, but there's probably a lot more that goes into just turning up and doing a headline set somewhere. So tell me more about the experiences you've had with interviewing people on that basis.
Yeah. So for background, my day job is BBC Radio 6 Music and my daily show, which on and off through a day takes pretty much the whole day to put together each show. That involves a lot of listening to new music. 6 Music is a champion of new artists, new acts, and I get sent maybe, I don't know, 100, 150, sometimes even 200 new songs every single week. And because of what I consider to be the privileged position that I'm in, I think it's really important to listen to as much of that music as possible and find the best stuff. And there's, another side to that too. It's not just about finding the best stuff. It's about making sure that the best stuff doesn't get ignored. So I don't want to be that guy that didn't hear the new Coldplay early. So a lot of the stuff that comes in, that gets sent, is very new, very fresh. And some of those artists, I would say Sam Fender was someone that I played early demos of and did, I think, the first 3 premieres of Sam Fender's first singles. And look, he's gone absolutely stratospheric, deservedly so, quite rightly. So putting the show together, the listening to the music, deciding what's going to go where in the show, plotting the show, making sure that that it's the right balance and flow of music. There's also features that require work through the day, and then in advance of the show on a morning before I start, my producer and I will run through every last detail with a team of 3, myself and 2 other producers working on the show through the day and then on the morning. And what How to DJs taught me is that for other radio DJs, Greg James is a good example. Greg and I have very similar philosophies about the way that radio should sound and the way that it should be delivered. We talk on the podcast a lot about how much planning goes into a show, and that's the same for club DJs too. Carl Cox talks about planning, and that's not about turning up as a club DJ and knowing which songs you're going to play in what order, because that is all about the feel, that is all about the moment. But you need to have a great idea about where you're going, what audience you're going to be playing to, and be ready for. And this goes for all of, even the club DJs. You can understand perhaps what I'm saying in terms of radio shows, but in terms of club DJs, that pre-planning is really important. It's about the searching out of great new songs to add to a set. It's about knowing what the set is going to be, but then being ready to expect the unexpected.
Yeah, I can see that. I do a lot of public speaking, and when I first started, you just learn to have the experience of knowing when something goes wrong, you turn up and something's not quite right on the stage, that's not, and it's having that experience to turn up and still perform at a higher level, right?
That's so true. And I think that younger me used to feel like I could wing it in most circumstances, whether that be on the radio, hosting events, or playing out live. But the only way to be the best version of yourself in any of those circumstances is to be prepared. I can't overstate it. And I would be amazed if anyone that is passionate about their job and ambitious would say differently.
Yeah, 100%. And you're right. There's so much that goes into those DJ sets, into what you do. And I think a lot of people see, especially for me growing up, I was going to lots of different clubs, Fabric in London, and you see the DJ in the moment, and they're in the moment performing, but we don't see, it's like the iceberg effect. You don't see everything underneath, all of the preparing, the time that's taken, the experience, the continuous working out, what could go right, what could go wrong. There's a lot there, just in the moment when you're a spectator and someone listening to music, you're just seeing the person in that moment, and you think, oh wow, to be a DJ, that's it's going to be the best job in the world. They just turn up and DJ a couple of venues each week, but actually there's hours of work that goes into it before that, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Of course, there's the preparing of the loops, the edits, making sure you've got the right music and that you're going to hit home with the crowd that you've got, and all of that planning allows for the inevitable when something goes wrong, because it's a live environment and stuff can and does go wrong. Rarely will it ever be a completely smooth night, because there are so many variables.
Definitely. What do you think the biggest challenge is for DJs now, or new up and coming DJs trying to get in? You're saying about the amount of records that you get sent on a weekly basis. What do you think the biggest challenges are for an up and coming DJ?
Well, I think that just like being in a band, it's never been easier to make music, but it's never been harder to get heard. And I think that everyone considers themselves, with all due respect, Henry, to your ambitions, everyone thinks they can be a DJ, because it can be done quite simply. There are so many different apps that make it very easy, but it's about time, and it's about experience, and there are exceptions where someone can break through very early. There are ridiculously talented young people who will always be the exception, but I think it comes back again, Henry, to the prep, to the hours, putting in the hours, getting the experience, and it does get easier. I would say that even though I still spend as much time, perhaps even more time, preparing what I do, it's a hell of a lot easier in the execution these days, whether that be the radio show or hosting, DJing out.
Yeah, definitely. And you're right. There are so many tools out there that you can use. I tried getting into DJing when I was 17, when we were all going out all the time. And then a couple of years ago, actually through COVID, I went, do you know what? I'm going to really try and do DJing again. And I bought one of these DJ boards, which wasn't proper Technics decks. It was a digital thing. And the thing is my need to just press the auto tune, the auto mix was too easy. And then you're still not doing it properly. Where I've got friends who have been DJing since 17, and I go to their house for a mix, and they're just dropping in tunes left, right, and centre. So you're right. There's so much more that it's the going back to their 10,000 hour rule again, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, absolutely, 100%. Because it's about the feel, isn't it? It's about just your instinct in that moment, and the 10,000 hours is what helps you prepare for whatever the eventuality.
Yeah, definitely. So what's next for How to DJ podcast? What have you got coming up?
So, every time we get to the end of a series, I think, well, that was an amazing guest lineup, and I wonder where it will go next, because I think, have I sort of spoken to all of the big players? And yes, I've been really lucky through now 8 series to have spoken to some of my heroes, really famous names, as well as DJs who might well be lesser known to the general public, but actually are some of the guys with the best stories. So right at the beginning, series 1 started with the very first episode of the podcast was with a DJ called Dave Hasdam, an absolute legend at the Hacienda, one of the great Manchester names. Dave shares his stories are at times actually unbelievable, like talking about the time he had a gun pulled on him in the DJ booth at the Hacienda. From Radio X, John Kennedy. So Dave talked in the very first series about times at the Hacienda, one of the greatest music club venues of all time. John Kennedy talks in absolute detail about how he puts together his new music show Exposure on Radio X. So 2 different ends of the DJ spectrum, both absolutely fascinating in their differences and similarities, really, based on all of what we've talked about. Jam Supernova, a colleague of mine at Six Music, talked about her time at the Brit School and then working behind the scenes as a researcher and producer to now be. So she did that for a long time prior to being on air, and now is one of the most respected DJs in the UK. DJ Yoda talked about cut and pasting, about samples, and about playing to very, very small crowds. And that's, I think, also a bit of a theme that's emerged, that every single DJ at some point has either played to nobody or even cleared a room. Norman Cook, Fatboy Slim, talked about the importance. This is, again, kind of, I think we're focused, Henry, on I think there's something very obvious that's coming through here, and that is there are no shortcuts. Norman Cook talked about how important it is to do the wedding DJ circuit. One of the great superstar DJs, and he talks in detail about why doing wedding discos is important and what it teaches you. Carl Cox talking about starting out in a pub with Oakenfold and Judge Jules. And then Dave Beer, who set up a club night called Back to Basics in Leeds. His name kept coming up, loads of DJs referencing him. So finally, on the most recent series of the podcast, Dave was with me, and his stories are hell-raising. He talks about the different acts that have played in their very early days at Back to Basics. Daft Punk spring to mind before they were famous. Dave provided a platform at Back to Basics for the best new DJs. He has the most unbelievable ear for who will be successful. And also, I think what is incredible is when listeners get in touch and share their memories of seeing these DJs and how long they followed them for and why they've been such an important part of their lives.
Yeah, no, and you're right. You've hit so many nails on the head in that, with the sense that it is, no one is an overnight success, and I think that one of the biggest challenges I see in the world today is the social media of seeing people when they see the finished article, they don't see all of the wedding gigs, they don't see all of the, you know, the times that they did have they were playing to an empty club, or they were the warm-up set and there was 2 people in the room. You know, all those experiences all compound into getting to that place that they need to be. And then you see people like, you know, Norman Cook, Carl Cox, and the crowds that they sell out now. And people sometimes feel like, oh, I just need to become a DJ and I'm going to be able to get that. And it does take a lot of time and a lot of effort, doesn't it?
And a lot of toll in a lot of cases, yeah. And so mental health comes up in our conversations very often. A great DJ called Barry Ashworth, who I absolutely adore. I was a fan first, and I'm really lucky, I feel, to say that he's now a friend of mine. He's the lead singer in a band called Dub Pistols. And Barry talks, I think, very articulately about the highs and lows of his journey from being a small-time pub DJ to getting signed with his band with Dub Pistols, and the highs and lows of having a lot of money and then squandering the whole thing on, I think I can probably just say it because he talks about it very openly on the podcast. It's a very powerful listen, talking about how he got caught up in drink and drugs. And that is a world that all of these guys, I think that's something that, you know, it's no secret that world exposes people to, and some people are able to restrain or moderate their drink and drugs, but some fall victim to it. And Barry would definitely, Barry talks a lot about how he just got carried away on a number of occasions, but pulled back, and describes himself as what does he call himself? Successfully unsuccessful.
I can relate to that a lot because I've seen the Dub Pistols at a lot of festivals, and I love going to festivals. And I am a recovering drug addict, so I was into drum and bass music as a kid, and then loved it, but never, the party couldn't ever end for me. I just wanted to continue it, and I think it's relatable when you're in that world. And fortunately now I've been sober 4 years, and I still go to different club nights and things, and absolutely love it because it's about the music. But I can see how when you're in that world, how easy it is to get caught up in it all, because I certainly was someone that got caught up in that world. So it's great that you talk about that on your show. And what other mental health issues, and how can you help through what you do?
Hey, look, before I answer that question, Henry, I'm curious to know how your experiences differ from going to a club and drinking and whatever else, and going sober.
Okay, so I spent my life going to lots of club nights, and really loved my music's drum and bass. It's what I love from a very young age, and I love all genres. And when we used to go to Fabric and things, my wife likes breakbeat, and we used to have a great night on a Friday night at Fabric, and it was a lot of fun. But a lot of the time when you're in that world, you're not actually that present with the music. There are moments that you are, but you're either chatting to someone on a stairwell, or you're losing, go in the toilet, you're talking to someone else, and you're not that present through a lot of the music. And what I found the difference is when I became sober, my wife's been instrumental in helping me through everything. I said, I really miss going out. I really miss the sound of walking into a venue and hearing the drums, hearing the loud noise, feeling that everything that you used to feel. And she said, well, you don't have to not do that just because you're sober. And I was like, well, yeah, but that's what people do when they go out. She's like, no, loads of people go out sober, raving, and go to things. And I said, okay, great, let's go. And now that luckily there's a lot of daytime stuff that they do, at Printworks and other places in London. And it's very, very different. But I think, especially for drum and bass, it seems to be a genre of music that is acceptable for all ages and all people. There doesn't seem to be any kind of like there's any ageism or anything like that. So I still feel very, very comfortable in a drum and bass club and just listening to music. I can't maybe dance. I've not got the stamina I was when I was younger, but 3-4 hours in a drum and bass club is it's still part of my heaven. So yeah, it's very, very different, but I feel like I'm more present and I can enjoy the music music a lot more now, because I'm feeling it. I'm aware of everything going on. I'm not out of my head essentially, or having a conversation with someone on a stairwell for 3 hours and then realizing the night's almost over. So very, very different. But I feel very fortunate now that I can still go out and experience music and soak it all up and just be in the moment more.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And really well put. So, in answer to your question, then, yeah, I am an ambassador for a music therapy charity called Nordoff and Robbins, and they work as a charity with young people, a lot of them with learning difficulties, and older people with dementia, and it's about music as a way of bringing joy, and music unites, and I think brings people together, and the transformations are quite off the scale. In terms of, in answer to your question, what am I doing to support people with mental health issues? I don't know. If I think I'm very keen on the radio and on the podcast to have the conversations. And I think that's perhaps the extent of my contribution is getting people to talk. There's a great new artist called Hack Baker, who was on my Six Music show with me, and he really opened up. He felt that, I guess, as we were talking, he talked about his tough childhood, about leaving home very young, and about going to prison. And I think he sort of felt like there was a moment where we got to in the conversation where he could talk about his mental health, and oh my God, the outpouring from listeners has been off the scale. It continues. It just keeps coming, because what he did was talk about a subject that used to be so taboo, and he made it feel like it's okay. He's a young, very cool artist who let down all his barriers and just talked. And I think talking is really important.
Key, yeah. And Chris, you're exactly right. Just giving him that safe space that he felt it's okay to now open up is exactly what is needed for mental health, to be giving people and making subjects less taboo and being able to open up and talk. You know, we talk about fail forward and mental health in this podcast, and it's about just saying it's okay to be able to come forward and have a safe space. So, you know, really, really fair play to you for being able to create that with them.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's the credit, it goes to the guests that feel like it's okay to talk about that stuff. I mean, I suffer from mental health issues myself. Probably, I think we all do in different ways. I think the pressures of society today mean that we all have worlds colliding in our minds, and you know, the idea that we're constantly scrolling, taking in more opinion than we ever have done. And I'm not, I think I'm one of the, I guess, few parents that would argue that with our daughter, who's 13, I'm not against her being on her phone. That's never going to change. By taking her phone off her for an hour, you know, the difference that will make to her life is minimal. And I think there is probably quite a lot of positives. I think sort of latest studies say that kids are not detrimentally affected by what they find on their phones. Obviously, that goes without saying that there are massive exceptions to that. But for the most part, I would say that we all have to try and find balance. I used to love, up until quite recently, sadly, we lost our little dog. And the way I would clear my head would be to take him walking. And it was my favorite thing. And we lost him very prematurely. He was only 5. And I know that I am finding it hard to find a new way to get into that space that I would find with him.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, and yeah, it's you're right. Walking's a massive part of just being able to clear your mind from the day-to-day clutter of social media and everything else that goes on the world. Um, I'm cautious of time, so I've got a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap up. Firstly, Chris, what is your out of all the genres, because you've got such a collective taste that I listen to on your early morning show, what would be your number one genre choice? And to emphasize more on that, what would be the perfect night out for you in a club, a festival, wherever? What would be the music and the place or the vibe that you'd get?
Wow. Just a little question.
Just a little question.
I would love to see Talking Heads reform, and it's kind of there's kind of murmurs and rumours. Talking Heads playing Glastonbury would be pretty much the absolute dream. I've been really lucky to have seen most of the biggest artists that I love, see them live. There are a few that I've missed out on, but yeah, I've been really lucky. And most recently, Arctic Monkeys, I'm a huge fan. So seeing Arctic Monkeys at Old Trafford Cricket Ground in Manchester at the start of this year, that was amazing. That was just something else. I loved every second of that. But equally, I love indie as much as I love electronica. I'm a huge Depeche Mode fan, a huge New Order fan. And I think that there's an incredibly brilliant new music scene, a new band called Porridge that I'm really excited by. They've got big things planned for 2024, and that they could go the whole way. I think they really are the real deal, a brilliant electronica band. They are awesome.
Love that. I'll definitely check that out, and I'll send that to my sister and Sarah as well. So yeah, thank you. And you've set the intention for Glastonbury now. So hopefully I'll see you there at some point. We've not been back in quite a few years, but we're looking to go soon once we can finally get tickets again.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Thank you. So just finally, Chris, it's been amazing having you on. How do we find your podcast?
So the day-to-day radio show is on BBC Radio 6 Music. The podcast, it's easy to find. It's podfollow.com/howtodj, but the search How to DJ works too.
Fantastic. What we'll do is we'll put the links in the show notes so anyone listening on, they can just click on that. Have you got any final words for us, Chris?
No, just thank you so much. I feel very lucky to have been asked to come on with you. So thank you, Henry, and keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you, Chris. Great to have you on board, and it's been a great session.
Cheers, Henry.